Welcome to the very first Aperture PhotoBook Club. We are so thrilled you are with us, whoever you are, wherever you may be. And I am especially grateful to those of you who are here in the room with me. Thank you to Clark Leland, and the production crew that's making us look so good and sound so good. We really appreciate it. And I'm going to go over a few ground rules. So, like all book clubs, this is a space where we are going to share our thoughts, authentic, real thoughts. Some of us are drinking cocktails, some are still on water, anything goes, whatever you're doing at home, also fine. But we're not gonna worry so much about taking turns, except in the beginning as we introduce ourselves. So this is a book club hosted by Aperture. I am Zora Meister, I'm Aperture's executive director, and it has been a dream since I started at Aperture to work with colleagues such as Lesley Martin sitting here to think about how we can use the work that Lesley and her fellow editors at Aperture are doing, using the book as a sort of platform for artists' voices. And this is something that Aperture has been doing for the last 50 years at least with books. And really, in some ways, since 1952, when Aperture was founded by a group of artists and writers and curators. So we are thrilled to welcome you into this Aperture community tonight. And let's think, what else have I forgotten? Oh, we're gonna limit this to about an hour. Everybody's busy, so no matter how great the conversation is, we're cutting it off at an hour. We will, though, be addressing your questions throughout. So I have a confidence monitor here, which means that I'm going to be able to see your questions. Please send them in the chat, and we'll work them into our conversation as we go around. And next time, if you have any questions in advance, you can also submit them to photobook@aperture.org. But tonight, just use the chat. So this is our very first one. We want to thank our sponsor, Ingram Content Group. Thank you, Ingram, yay. We appreciate your support. We also want to thank Baxter Street and the 7G Foundation, because without our partnership with them, this book wouldn't exist. So we'll get into the whole history of that, but thank you to Baxter Street, the Camera Club of New York, and to the 7G Foundation for making this whole project possible. And overall, since this is our very first one, we're trying it out. Tell us what you like. Tell us what you don't like. You can be ruthless. If you have a mean comment, we won't read it out loud, but we'll make note of it for later. But above all, if you like it, share it with your friends, and thanks for joining us. So maybe we'll start with just a little bit of introducing ourselves. And if you don't mind, Lesley, going first.
Sure.
Tell us who you are. Where are you today?
I'm Lesley. Lesley Martin. Hi there. I'm the creative director at Aperture. I like to think of myself mostly as a bookmaker, an editor, and I had the great pleasure of working with Zora and Kevin and Danielle, the other half of WorkPlay, to make this happen. Yay.
I'm Zora Murff. I'm an artist and educator living in Arkansas, author of True Colors. It's this beautiful co-collaborative project, put together very beautifully by Aperture.
Thanks, Zora. So I'm Zora Meister, as we said. I'm executive director of Aperture, and I've been here for not quite a year. And this book club is made possible through so many wonderful colleagues of Lesley's and mine, and I thank them all for bearing with us, because it's a lot harder than it looks.
I'm Lucy Gallun, and I did not have anything to do with the making of this book. I'm a reader of this book. And I'm an ideal reader. I'm a fan of the maker and makers of the book. I'm a curator, and I work at the Museum of Modern Art here in New York, and have had the pleasure of working with Zora in that capacity, but I'm also, like I said, a fan who likes to see his and others' work on the printed page and elsewhere.
Hello, my name's Kevin McCoy. I'm one half of WorkPlay, and it has been an absolute pleasure to work with Zora and Lesley and this Aperture project. Oh. We're also designers and artists.
And where are you,
Oh yeah, so we're based in East St. Louis, Illinois, formerly St. Louis. We lived in both spots.
All right.
Thank you.
Great. So maybe we'll start with you, Zora. Tell us a little bit about what we're gathered to talk about tonight. You've described it as sort of a community platform that you wanted to share, but actually, however you want to situate it.
Yeah, absolutely. True Colors, I would say it's a moment, it's a mood. It's the culmination of a lot of experiences, as an artist, as a student of art, and now as a professor of art. The book started, was like winning the Next Step Award. Receiving that award at a time when I was just really in between things. I had published a book at no point in between the year prior. I'd been making some work, but I don't think I was like ready.
You were ready for the next step.
Right.
Lesley will attest. You were ready.
Being ready for the next step, but not really knowing what that next step was, I would say. And so, of course, the first thing I do is I get on the phone, with friends and loved ones and like, hey, man, this is happening. What do I do, right? And my friend Chris Graves, he told me that, this was the time to be direct. And I really took that to heart. 2020 was a really hard year for a multitude of reasons, right? And I wanted to talk about the moment, but I also wanted to use this as a moment to talk about me, this medium that I use, that I engage with, that I teach, that I love. What is really, truly at stake for me in this? And so it was a moment to be direct, but be direct maybe in a way of telling my story and what I was seeing in the world around me. This moment where, we're exposed to Black people dying on screen again. This quote unquote racial reckoning that was happening in the country. And it was important for me to talk about that specifically, but also talk about how those ills, of the things that led, this white police officer to murder a man in the streets. That, we feel those pressures as Black people. We feel those pressures everywhere we go. I feel it when I go to work every day. I feel it when I'm just walking down the street. These experiences that are handed to me, these experiences that I don't want that are handed to me, right? And so I wanted to just speak on that, speak on what it was that I was seeing, what I was feeling.
And you want to show us one or two things, in other words, with the book.
Absolutely.
And either about you and about that, because I think it's interesting how early you or your surrogate appear in the book. Maybe.
Yeah. So the first being, the beautiful cover that Kevin put together. This fold out. So this is a screenshot from one of my favorite TV shows, Atlanta, and it's. I started using it as an avatar, sort of this shield that I was putting on. It was my Zoom profile picture at work.
It's pretty shocking when you see it. Everyone has their smiling little professional face, and yours is not that.
Yeah, exactly. And so it was using this image, creating this moniker, Money Be Green, but as a way of putting on, this game face, I guess, so to speak, this way of sort of shielding myself so I felt comfortable saying the things that I needed to say. So there was that early appearance of, this sort of character that I'm building around myself, but then also, looking, when I started making the book, I started going back to, my earliest experiences as an artist. So this is, a double exposure self-portrait that I made when I was in undergrad, back in 2014. So this is one of the first times that I'm making an image. of myself, where I'm using the camera to define who I am, what I might be feeling. And then also thinking about how, how I draw inspiration or self-affirmation through visual culture. And so this work here, this image in the center comes from John Singleton's Boys in the Hood. But it's this character who shows the set of main characters a kindness. And that was, I remember watching that as a younger person and thinking to myself, I want to be kind, just like that person. So, they think this is really like a spread that's indicative of the foundation of the book, that I'm talking about me, but also the ways in which I find myself and messages for myself inside of visual culture.
So maybe while we're looking at a spread, we'll turn to Kevin and we'll say sort of, here's this artist who has these ideas, this ambition, but how they become a book.
Yeah, so, I want to mention that I really appreciate my wife for working, Danielle McCoy, working with me on this book. And I think a lot of these inspiration that came out was just our conversations with Zora. I think the first time we talked, we joked about this the other day. Danny's telling this story where Zora, calls us and he's like, hey, I got this project, and something had happened. I can't remember what it was, but I just went on this tangent. It was, of course, racially based, and Danny's like, you're gonna scare him away. But I think that connection that the three of us shared is what led us to making this.
By the way, nothing scares Zora away. I'm pretty sure you tried to scare Zora away. He's like, that's where I want to lean in. So.
Yeah, it was just.
Was that the first time you had spoken? No.
I think there was an email, and then we had a phone call.
Yeah, we had a phone call.
Yeah, and I don't know if you want to share.
Right. Well,
please.
Yeah.
Just share that.
I'm like on the phone with you, and you're like, "Hey, man, I just got to lay something down on you real quick." And you start going in this thing. I'm like, "I'm following you. I'm following you. I'm following you." And it was like in that moment being on the phone, like with family. It was just that, like, Danny's, in the back. Kevin, we're not here to talk about this right now, right? It's really like that.
Yeah, but maybe we are, right?
Yeah, that very family feel. But it was like, of course, feeling at home in that conversation, and then it becoming very clear that I sent y'all the sort of initial draft of what I had in mind, and y'all really provided. Like you had insight. You were talking about what you saw in the book, not speaking on like these are the things that we've done, right? Like you were saying, we checked this out, we looked at it deeply, we see this happening, we see that happening, we can do this here, we can do that there, right? Like that it was almost like it was meant to be. That's what that first conversation felt like.
Yeah, the content just really struck Danielle and I. We were so enamored with the presentation.
So you want to show us, like,
show us. Can we get into it?
Show us what you did.
Okay, so the first thing, we had some iterations. So Danielle and I were thinking about true colors and what that means. Mm-hmm. A person doesn't normally reveal their true colors. There's something that's kind of camouflaged, kind of hidden. And we came to this conclusion. So it's like, hey, I want to send you all this photo. I want to put this on the cover. I don't want to use my name on the cover. I just want this image. And so we decided, like Danny and I were thinking, we were brainstorming. A lot of these conversations will happen at night. We're very intuitive artists, so we go by what we feel.
It's not like a 9 to 5. You go to the studio. And
it's just, we look at the content and it tells us what it needs to be. And so we decided, I don't know if you all can see this.
I think they can see it, yeah. I think that guy can see it.
Sure,
yeah.
So the true colors is actually like a blind emboss is raised. So, depending on the angle, you don't necessarily see it, which kind of speaks to the true colors anyway. We wanted to kind of tie in, that conceptual idea. So, when we first got this book, we cried because what a lot of people didn't know, this is like the physical manifestation of everything that we've ever wanted to do. A perfect bound, exposed stitching, Swiss bound, gatefolds. It's like its own little universe in here. And that was just a blessing to see it in a physical form.
Mm-hmm. And I think one thing to maybe add to that was, like, you're saying that it's a manifestation of y'all's dreams coming true. But I think it was a really important starting point was that, yes, this was a moment where, I won this award and I can make a book that's solely about me and, of course, have people design it. But I wanted it to be a collective effort. It's not every day that, a publishing house knocks on your door and says, hey, your work, we want to publish your work, right? And so, to me, it would have been a complete spoil to only use that moment for myself. And it was really important, to work with y'all as collaborators in the design of the book. And then, everybody else who's in the book, right? That it was a space for us to all dream up something together. Yeah.
I mean, it's an unusual, well, maybe Lesley, let's bring you in a little bit about like how you bring together all of these voices and ideas and, what is an editor?
Oh, well, I mean...
What is an editor? Anyway.
It depends. I mean, really, an editor is a responsive role that I'm there to support the vision of the artist, support the designer who's charged with executing and turning that into a physical object. I mean, my expertise is in, I can do sequences, I love a good sequence, but you had such a clear vision for a structure and pairings and sort of call and responsive images. That wasn't necessarily where my skill was needed here. It was just sort of to figure out some, like working with Kevin and Danielle on some of the type things, the production aspects of the book, so that, we talked a lot about sort of hitting certain beats in the transition points between the sections. And I'm just there to sort of cheerlead and
this
help.
was a question that came in for Kevin, but maybe you both can talk about it. Speaking of hitting the beats, will you talk a little bit about the page numbers and how... Did I hit on a sensitive subject?
No.
It was a good question, whoever it was who asked it. So, yeah. So first of all, someone has to describe the page numbers. If you have the book at home, you're very lucky and you'll know for yourself. But if you don't, maybe one of you could tell us, what are we looking at when we're talking about the page numbers?
So the sections is like advancing through time. And so we were having this conversation and Danielle was like, what about, this VCR ticker, where it has the, minutes, seconds, minutes. And we wanted to find a typeface that kind of spoke to that, but didn't directly bite it. It's just kind of a nod. And I thought that was really fun, a fun way to address the page numbers and the sections in the book.
And I loved, once we figured it out, that because there's lots of complications here, that, there's so many layers and references to the video, the popular culture that you're talking about. You have Legacy Russell's contribution, which activated the video of Officer Goodman that becomes a real point of punctuation throughout. So I love when something as minor as a folio, a page number, kind of speaks to all of these different textures and ideas that are really clearly threaded through.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. What I think that, to me I was recalling these pivotal moments throughout my life and then trying to somehow illustrate those narratives through imagery, through text. And then, thinking about, how Danny wanted to include the VCR sort of timestamp, and then it's how do we utilize that as a way to refer the viewer back to the structure? And I think that's what it always ended up coming back to, was how do these things act as sort of an infrastructure? Mm-hmm. How do we, take advantage of everything visual that we're putting into the book? Mm-hmm. And so down to the pagination, right?
People don't think about it, but the page numbers, you register them as your...
Mm-hmm. They can be your friends.
They can be your... So speaking of our ideal reader, and that she loves the page numbers.
With the book,
but
I
also...
think that's what your ideal reader might do.
Yes, in that you are absolutely right. But what I was thinking, Lucy, you could talk, you I'm a recovering curator. You're an actual curator. But you think a lot. I know you first encountered Zora's work through a book, but you were thinking about it for an exhibition, and so maybe some of these works you knew in other contexts.
True, like Zora was saying, this book brings together so many recent works, but also works that you've been making over time, and so some of them I had seen before they ended up in this book. But yeah, I was thinking back to what it's like to experience an artist's work in different forms, and here we're maybe in a digital form or on some people's screens, and I was seeing some of Zora's work in that way, and then also encountering its relationship to one another through At No Point in Between, the book that you mentioned earlier. And in some ways, Lesley was talking about the sequences that you had so in your mind, these stories that are coming together in the book form. So all of these layers of images, past and present, that are talking to one another, and you're finding them all in this one piece as a reader, is really different from encountering one work as a photograph on its own, even if it's in concert with a few others. And so I kind of, I actually turned to this picture, the kids.
Turn it around, tell us what page. If you're
We're
home,
on page 00195. It's kids, these are kids talking about cameras, I think. And in MoMA's collection, after I had encountered Zora's work through books, and I hadn't met him, I had seen his work through books and in digital form and other things like that, we were able to acquire some of the works for the collection, including landscapes from this project At No Point in Between in North Omaha. Cityscapes of the city, but also these amazing portraits of folks in the community. And when the portraits came in, then you're really having a one-to-one relationship with a person who is living in North Omaha, or living the life that you're talking about here of a Black person in America in these many years. And in these pictures, they're called talking about, they're the person's name or who they are, talking about whatever it is that you as an artist was talking with that person or that group of people, as it were, about. And then suddenly there's this whole world opened up, and we have a number of these pictures now in the collection of this person talking about this. And though I understood that from the book form, it was really in so much more concert with these other stories of that history of that place, all the layers that come into play when you're in a book, rightly so. But yes, such a different experience to seeing the picture on its own, yeah.
And I think is actually one of the great things about a book, as much as I love an exhibition, that picture repeats in a way that if it were in an exhibition, doesn't it really? I think it repeats.
So
Okay. I'm like, wait, doesn't it repeat? It's a variant.
I didn't want to cut in.
Cut in.
We're in a club, we're in a book club.
So here's the strange thing. Danielle and I have been working on the book from purely a design mindset. So we're thinking of grids, how the images speak to us, how they want to be presented. So this is the first time that we've actually had a chance to look at it outside and taking the design hat off. And there's this folding of images, things, kind of complement or talk to each other. They keep getting folded in, and all of these different layers. Again, with that one picture with the children, you'll notice that the cop car in the background, and then their expression changes when it's not there. And so it's all of these different visual notes, even the section that we really geek out on.
Let's hear it.
Is here.
And turn it around. Oh, yeah.
Okay, so so there was a happy accident. So we were looking for a gray paper. And then when we got it, it was kind of like a green tint. Yeah, and we decided, Zora's asking us, she's like, what do you all think about this? And I was like, I think we should keep it, because we think about the thing that I immediately went to was slave patrols, right? And, the prison system. So I thought about incarceration, mass incarceration, cash bail system, all of those things begin to flood. And that's why we decided, maybe we should keep that,
But wait, for somebody who's not holding it, tell us a little bit more about what's the difference between those pages, those pictures.
So yeah, the pages, the paper is obviously, you can tell that it's, imagery from a police officer maybe having a firearm, right? It's also a lighter weight, it's not as heavy, kind of fragile, so we also like that fragility aspect of it. And also, again, that green tinge, so all of those things are kind of referencing.
What's tucked in there, just in case?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I'm asking a question I know the answer to. Sorry, that's the cardinal rule. You're never supposed to ask a question you know the answer to.
The tipped-in sheets. Zora, do you want to, get into it about the tipped-in sheets?
Yeah, so let's see. Yeah, so that's from the section Blue Period. And so this is, it's a section that uses, you're sort of introduced with this tip-in, this yellow notebook paper. You see these images that come from a policing textbook, and so it's talking about speed reloading firearms, like how to properly, use a firearm to subdue a subject or a suspect. And then you get to a second insert, which is a reproduced letter from the Klansman Manual, a publication from the 20s that was used to instruct people how to begin a chapter of the Ku Klux Klan. And so, the first insert is a poem that I had written when I was realizing that at work I was being actively tokenized, and I really wasn't sure what to do with what I was feeling. And so I had decided that I just need to get it out somewhere. And so I just wrote down, exactly what I was feeling, and it came out in this kind of poetic way. And then, the section begins, showing these white hands with firearms, kind of representing this institution in a way, right? And then you get to this piece of paper, this other insert, this letter for the Klansman Manual. But that's talking about, I think here, I'm just thinking about how these ideas get institutionalized, how, racist practices exist in the police because policing in America was established on racist practices. And then, getting to, these next spreads where you see that the person holding the gun, dealing with the firearm is black. And so that's illustrating me, this way of subtly implicating myself as a part of the institution. But in this kind of battle, right, where I'm fighting back, I'm shooting back, and then, in this act of reloading at the end, right? And then we continue on to the next section.
So thank you. That was great to hear you talk. So Trent.
Yes.
Hi, Trent. Asked a question to you saying, is there an ideal way to experience this book? So is there that section or another? Is there one you keep coming back? Is there a way?
If you're not me, the ideal reader.
We pretend we didn't have the ideal reader in the room. Pretend, right?
Yeah, well,
we'll ask you this question next.
All right, yeah, I'm hoping this is Trent Bozeman, one of my grad students. Okay. Also,
we don't know. No
individual who is pictured in the book. I'm trying to find the portrait, if I can find it quickly enough.
Maybe. Kevin might know where it is. No?
Kevin might have a better idea. Here it is right here. I got it. So I guess if this is the right Trent.
Okay.
Hi, Trent. Miss you, buddy. Gonna be home soon. We'll hang out again. But yeah, so, for me, there's real,
Wait, but there were two portraits of Trent.
Yeah, there's two.
Okay,
Yeah, two portraits. He appears twice. Right.
I mean, absolutely. I'm not an ideal reader, but I'm an aspiring ideal reader.
So I think, to me, the right way to read it is to spend time with it. So you can, you have the possibility of exploring all of the connections that you see. And to me, there's like, of course, endless possibilities in there, but there are very direct things that are happening intentionally, right? But the only real way that you're going to access that is through like spending time with the content, actually looking at the images, actually reading the essays, thinking about how those things make you feel. To me, that's like the best way possible through the book. As far as a section, I love everything, but I think what I love the most are, the contributions from other people. Yeah. Those are my favorite parts. It doesn't have to be your favorite part, out there, whoever's reading. But that's one of my favorite parts because, again, it was just a true pleasure to honor these people that I very much love and who mean the world to me, who have shared in this endeavor with me and made this book what it can be. Yeah.
Can I dovetail? Like the Gaskins,
you can dovetail.
The Gaskins conversation.
Yeah.
Again.
Bill Gaskins.
Bill
yes.
Gaskins.
That's the leading one. That's kind of the opener.
It's so good. Yeah. You all should read it.
Come in. Kelly, can you get the door? Hi, come on in. It's okay. We thought we were specific about the times, but it's okay. Welcome. We thought it was going to be my son.
Right.
He would never ring the doorbell, though. He would just barge in. Okay, carry on.
Yeah, but the conversation with Bill Gaskins, that was a really important one to have because his. I asked him to contribute a diptych that he made, but it was because that diptych was...
I'll look for it. You talk.
Yeah. Because that diptych was important to me in my own journey as a photographer. I found this work, The Negro Mountain is Higher, a diptych he made in 2003. I found that as a grad student, a time where I was trying to be critical about America, especially, or specifically, its racial divides through making images of a landscape, but being very much told in a lot of different ways that wasn't possible, or that what I was trying to do didn't make sense. And, I found this diptych and there it was. It made sense. Right, exactly, right? But that, here's an artist, who's also Black, who was doing the thing that I was striving to do. And even though we didn't have the opportunity to talk in that moment, just that act in itself told me that I could do it too, right? It gave me that license. And that's like where the title comes from, True Colors or Affirmations in a Crisis. That, to me, I'm
Actually,
again,
my son is
I'm talking about myself, but I'm also talking to anyone else who has had similar experiences to me, right? Just in the same way that Bill did. Yeah.
I love how just like in the last however many minutes you've mentioned your own grad student. I mean, he did maybe send a question. And then, another generation of educator that you were in conversation with. So like this community that you've brought in is intergenerational and also kind of spans that time that we were talking about. It's not just like our own experience right now, but the experiences that others have had before that have played into what you were living as a student and then as a teacher. Yeah,
absolutely. Well, I think that intergenerational aspect of it is really important to me, right? We've seen this cycle of violence that seems to operate, every 100 years we seem to find ourselves in this very particular moment, right? And like talking with Bill is just talking to someone who's been there before, who can tell me the things that I need to be looking out for. But then also maybe what are things that he wasn't thinking about in his own time that he can learn from me, right? That it's this constant exchange. And that's the most beautiful part about having everyone in here. Nick Drain and Widleen Cadet, they're both artists who I've been a mentor for. That doesn't mean they're only learning from me. I'm also learning from them, right? Nick Norman, Tay Butler, they were both my students, people that I work with in the educational environment. So I think it's that connection is rather important to me, and it does show up in that way.
I think you can feel that in the book. Like Zora mentioned earlier, it feels like family. This wasn't just, okay, we'll sit down and do this project. There were lots of conversation, lots of laughs. We had some really deep conversations. Zora has lent his ear, things that I'm seeing on the news, and I think you can feel that energy in the book. It is very communal, and that's the beautiful thing about it.
That's one of the beautiful things.
Yeah. One of the,
Yeah.
So do you want to maybe tell us another example of how, show us someone else's work who's in it instead of we'll just say their names in case people aren't.
Yeah. So of course I gotta start. Big shout out to my one and only, my day one, my ride or die, Raina Young. I know you're watching this right now, baby. So there's a special gatefold. The section is titled Love. Obviously.
Here.
Yeah,
I think I found it.
Yeah, you got it. Yeah.
No.
I can't find anything in my own book. This is embarrassing.
Here it is. Here. No.
Lesley's got it. Yeah,
Of course,
Lesley's got
Lesley
it.
found it.
Yeah.
I don't know which camera.
And actually,
Right.
it's great that it's one of the sort of signature beginnings of a fold, and then it opens into,
Yeah, absolutely. And so, I wanted each contributor to really just have complete license over what it was that they decided to put into the book. And so, what Raina decided to do was to have a grid of pictures of me over the span of our relationship. And then in response to that, I decided to pair it with the only one portrait that she's ever let me make of her. She hates having her photograph taken. But I like that, this idea of us, sort of immersed in this life together as photographers and artists, and then using that thing, that same thing to look at one another. Right here in the middle. Very subtle. Yeah.
Right now, that was very strict of you.
What about these reversals that are going on here?
So I wanted, I wanted it to have this feel like you're gaining access by looking inside. So it's sort of making these images transparent, so to speak. But this image here is these empty staircases. So this is another image that you see alternates of throughout the book, and even just like a motif, just these empty staircases. And that's something that when we were in grad school together, I remember very specifically bringing an image like this, one of these images into critique, and everybody just really shutting it down, except for Raina. She was like, I think they're great, just keep doing it. And I did just that. I just kept doing it. And then, this image of this rose, this is just an afternoon that we were together in a rose garden, and I made this image to, just because, and so it's just again a special shared moment. But I think that the collaborations, again, having this very loose format where everybody gets to bring what it is they want to bring to the table was really important. And even, it informed how the book took shape. So throughout the book, you see stills of Eugene Goodman, the video of Eugene Goodman, running through the Capitol, leading the group of rioters, to a particular point. But it really took shape, thinking about.
Here's another one. So
yes, exactly.
We'll all pull up different ones.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Look, we all have different ones.
But it took shape in this way that Legacy Russell contributed this really beautiful essay, Black Magic, and after speaking with Legacy about the book and the structure, she decided to reference the Goodman video very directly, where she mentions very specific timestamps in the video: 9 seconds, 11 seconds, 23 seconds, 34 seconds. And so when I read that, a light bulb went off, and I was like, I need to use those exact moments. And so I went and I found the screenshots for those exact moments. And then Lesley, I believe it was you who came in and was like, could we use these as a way of marking the beginnings of a new chapter, so to speak. And so where the contributors really influenced, again, like the form and the structure of the book. And I think that's one of those things that really makes it sing, is that, again, rather than just planning an essay in a particular place, it's like using that essay to then recreate aspects of the entire endeavor.
And as a reader, you're going through it. To your point about needing to spend time with it, you're registering them. They feel vaguely familiar. You're thinking, should I be recognizing what I'm seeing? It seems like an institutional space, but like you're not quite sure what you're seeing. And then there are one or two where then I think you're like, oh, I know what I'm seeing. And then you get to Legacy's text. And then it makes you want to, then you start all the way from the beginning and you think, this is what's marking these, and it ties into the pagination. And, it's a beautiful organic thing. So we have a question from Jameen. And the question is, how has your idea of a photo book changed after making your own? Or has it? And if so, how? If I can adapt the question.
Yeah. I think that...
and not that this is your first one, but so you can
Yeah.
answer that. How is it after your first one, and how has this changed you?
Yeah, well, I would say, I've made 4 books now, and each experience was rather different. And I would say that this was probably, I feel like every book I've made has worked me up to this moment, that I learned something new from making, each different book. And all of those experiences just went into the making of this one. So, I would say that I don't know if it's changed anything, like changed the way that I consider photo books or consider making my own books. But I feel like I knew exactly what this needed to be because of everything that I had made before. Yeah.
And is there maybe something you feel like you don't have to do now that you're, in other words, is there something that's been kind of released from you in this?
I think that, this was a very cathartic experience. And I think it kind of goes back to, that the insert, the yellow notebook paper, that, these were all things that I felt like I needed to say. And this was the best way that I knew how. I feel lighter. I feel, I feel like I'm not doing shit, so stop asking me about what I'm going to make next, because it's not happening for quite some time. But,
good to know. Yeah. Take that, all you sitting at home, don't ask.
I think it was a very, very cathartic experience. And I think just an extreme pleasure to be able to put something out, on this scale. Because it's not every day that someone gets to do this, and that's not something that I take lightly.
We feel the same way. So.
Yeah, can I ask a question about us or like all of the other readers?
Can I also just ask, I have no idea what time it is. I promised we weren't going to go over an hour, but Brendan, you can let me know. Okay, fine, sorry. But now ask your question.
Zora hasn't watched.
It's little.
Okay. No, you've said a couple times, you've talked about like your need to be direct in this book, like right now you have this moment that it's time to do it. And how you were wanting to talk about how you're implicated in this bigger history, this bigger story that's been affecting your life, the lives of so many people, and was on your mind. And you've also talked about how reading the book, people might think about how they're implicated too. I think you just said that recently in the trailer for this event. And you had said it before, and I was like, Zora's really telling us this, like we're implicated too. And I felt like that was a really important charge for me, and I work with photographs and the history of photographs every day, like as part of my job, and that's something that I should take stock of and take responsibility for. you know, what's my relationship to these pictures? What am I putting out there? What am I paying attention to? What am I not? You know, but I also wondered, like, maybe for the other participants at home in the book club, you know, the other readers, that maybe like their relationship to this history isn't quite so obvious as ours, who are like cultural producers or working with photographs. Like, how are we all implicated, you know? And if your hope is that you're dealing with, in a cathartic way, in various ways, your own implication as an educator, as a maker, you know, what are those ways that we all are, not just us that are literally looking at photographs and putting them on the wall, but like that bigger question about our implication in this story.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think that, you know, I would say, as far as like creating visual culture, thinking directly about the act of representing oneself or representing other people and the impacts that holds, right? You know, if we're talking about seeing a landscape photograph made by another Black artist emboldening me to do the same thing in the face of being told that I can't, right? You know, I've been gaslit, I've been gatekept, I've been tokenized. If we know that institutions are made of people, who's gatekeeping, who's gaslighting, who's tokenizing, right? Yeah. If we think about the act of representation, what are the ways that, you know, white artists have played around with racialized others? You know, there's a spread about Cindy Sherman using blackface, right? That's not something to be taken lightly. It's a history that like seems to get erased because of the person making it, right? But it still very much exists to me. It's a hurtful thing, it's a harmful thing, right? But did she think about it in that moment? How far that image can carry? That maybe it emboldened a student at the University of Arkansas to also don blackface? I don't know, like who's to say, right? But it carries that implication. Yeah. And that's something that I don't take lightly, and I don't think any of us in this world, in the art world, so to speak, should take lightly.
And what you've done in the book and in the design is you've incorporated your work, artworks by others, but also images that are not artworks. I mean, we've just been talking about so many of them, and you've layered them like directly on top of one another, or put them in sequence with one another. And so I guess that's also what I was talking. It's not just like artworks that are photographs in the museum, but like how those impact or are related to, you know, the photographs, the images that we all encounter in our lives all the time.
I think that that strategy of sort of remixing and sampling, just to sort of talk about narrative strategies of how you activate those other meanings and sort of force them back on themselves in a weird way. You know, I'm very familiar with a lot of narrative strategies. A lot of people compare editing and sequencing to music and like the orchestral swell and all of this, but this is the first time that I think that sampling and remixing really brought in a language. You know, it's a language of rap, it's a language of disruption, of borrowing, and I mean, we've talked a little bit about that, but can you say anything?
Yeah, and that aligns. Actually, there was a question from Ilsa. Who, I mean, hello. Who was asking, were you listening to music as you edited? Yeah, Lesley, as you were talking, this came up. Were you listening to music as you edited the book? And if so, how did this influence your way of working? So maybe you and Kevin can both.
Yeah. Well, I think like, you know, I was listening to music. You know, I think that like one of the ways, right, there's a playlist I made to go with the book. There's, you know, I often describe the book that like as you're looking through it, you're essentially spending a Saturday with me in my studio as I look and think about things. But you know, towards the act of sampling, you know, thinking about you know, how sound can be used to create a sense of nostalgia or reference a particular thing, right? and I think that goes back to even, you know, wanting to work with Kevin and Danny as designers. You know, they're from the same place, right? They've had a lot of the same experiences. They grew up witnessing a lot of the same visual culture, just from a regional sense. So, you know, of course it made sense, like, for them to design it because they're gonna inherently understand what it is I'm putting down. Just like, you know, like Kendrick Lamar, you know, sampling 70s funk music because that's what he grew up listening to in the car. You know, he's incorporating his own interpersonal history into what it is that he's making. And so I'm doing the same, you know, if I'm choosing a photo of my mom, you know, from 1979, you know, to reflect on not only, you know, her being my mother, but thinking about the places that we've been together in time. You know, this image was, this portrait of her was taken in Omaha, Nebraska in 1979. You know, in 2018, I end up in the same landscape, making pictures. What is that, right? But then, yeah, like bringing that history into it and marking it as like, this is my history, this is important. Yeah.
I mean, I think there's a visual language, but there's also an audible, you know, and we oftentimes would share music, and we did play music while we were designing the book. And again, it just puts you in a particular moment. Like, I remember when Kendrick Lamar's All Right came out and everything that happened just by that one song. Even though it's so many years old now, I still remember everything that happened when I first heard that track. And it's just like smells, like they rekindle these memories. And I think that's the reason why.
And photographs,
yeah,
too.
totally.
Yeah. Little plug for photography. I can't help myself. Okay, so you can take a fish out of water. Okay, so we have two last questions, and maybe, Zora, you could help us wrap this up by saying, has this book had an impact on your teaching in any way? You know.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think the book had a direct impact on my teaching, but I would say the making of the book had an impact on my teaching. You know, thinking about the intergenerational nature of what it is that I do as an educator, that, you know, it's my responsibility to unlearn all of the harmful things that I learned in that space. So I don't do that to other people who then carry on that same way of being. Right? And I would say that's probably the biggest impact that making the book had in that realm. Yeah.
And the last one for you, Kevin, from Catherine, is how has this impacted your ideas about design and projects that you're working on?
Yeah, I think, like, us talking to Zora and working with Lesley, they just gave us creative license to just play and explore. And that's not always the case. You know, and I think in that there was a lot of freedom to try new things and new ideas and play with layering. And that's really great when you can do that, because I feel like there are all of these other ideas that you can explore, but normally you don't get a chance to do that. We were able to exercise and stretch. And you talk about people, especially Black designers, being put in the margins, but to be able to be on this project and then stretch out and take that space creatively, that's a blessing.
Well, it's a privilege for us, I'll say. I know Lesley and I, you know, this is part of the joy of our work. It relates to the joy of what Lucy's talking about, is like, how can we help, you know, this medium of photo books, you know, people may not, well, actually they may own your photographs because you do a good job of thinking about how to help, but like, we'll never own a Robert Frank photograph, but I can own the Americans. And for somebody who may or may not own your work, they can own this, and it's a real way of understanding it and living with it. And so from my perspective, it's a joy to be at Aperture and to think like, what can we do to encourage this? And so that's a wrap. No, just kidding. That's not really a wrap. Just kidding. That's all but I do want to say thank you to Zora, thank you Lesley and Lucy and Kevin. this was what I dreamed of when I thought of a photo book club, like to be able to bring you together to share this with everyone who's joining virtually. So thank you for everyone who took an hour out of your day to listen, whether now or in the future. Thank you, let's just say one more time, to Baxter Street and the 7G Foundation, because that partnership has really made this possible, and future projects, stay tuned. Speaking of stay tuned, a month from tonight, which is a Wednesday, April 27th, we are going to be talking with Farah Al-Qasimi about her book, Hello Future, that was published by Capricious. We're really looking forward to that as well. We want to thank Ingram Content Group, who have been such an amazing partner to us. If you buy the book, it's probably thanks to them that it makes it to your doorstep. So thank you, Ingram. Who other thanks? I want to thank our colleagues from Aperture, Kelly and Brendan, who are over there, and many other colleagues elsewhere who have made this book and actually all that we do at Aperture possible. And thank you again to Clark and Candle Productions for letting you see and hear us. Yeah. Oh, sorry, the last thing, most important, is remember this is an experiment. This is our very first one. Sun walking in again. It's our very first one. Your comments are welcome. If you haven't bought the book yet, but tonight made you want to buy it, you can still use your Photo Book Club discount. So that's one of, signing up for the Photo Book Club is free. Tell your friends, but it does mean, I was with a young art historian and she was looking to buy your book. And I said, well, have you signed up for the Photo Book Club? And she said, no, and I said, well, if you sign up for the Photo Book Club, you get a 30% discount. And so that's real. And so anyway, that's all. Have a good night, everyone. Join us again next one. Thanks again. Hey.